starting with congratulating the our volleyball team. Man, they are off to an unbelievable start, and certainly wishing them continued success. And then, being able to go on the road for the first time this year against our rival and also conference opponent in Florida State. And proud of our guys for our effort, our toughness. Certainly got off to three great quarters of football. Not so great in the fourth quarter, but certainly enough to get the win and get it done. And lots of guys played and did have some really significant contributions from a lot of guys. I'm just looking forward to getting back to work, getting better, and getting prepared for an excellent Louisville team coming in here a week from Friday. Questions, please.
Great. Thanks, Coach. As a reminder, if you can use the hand raise function so we know to call on you, and we'll start with Tim Reynolds. Tim, go ahead.
Thank you, Carter. Thank you, Mario, for doing this.
Sure.
The schedule, it's obviously unusual. Rivalry game, then a bye week, then a rivalry game, then a bye week. Nothing you can do about it, obviously, but one, how did you like the way your guys handled the first bye week? And two, is there an advantage when you go through the rigors of what is a Miami FSU game to have a little extra time before you get back at it?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, we certainly, it wasn't a schedule that you eased into, right? I mean, right away, you've got Notre Dame, and then you've got some of those other teams that you mentioned. So you had to be at least do your best to be at peak performance game one. So that requires an unbelievable summer and a really rigorous camp, knowing that you're going to have these two bye weeks scrunched in between a 3-week period of time. So I guess in essence, there's a lot of value to it if you have certain injuries that can be healed in that time. If not, there is kind of a, giddy up whoa, which you don't love too much. But we've used it the right way. We've healed up. We've worked really, really hard. We worked today. And also, finding time to prep for a very challenging opponent. And actually both opponents do things schematically that are so different than the rest of our schedule where, you got to treat it as a blessing and make no complaints or no remarks and just go forward and use it to the best of your abilities.
Mario, one quick follow. You've been very open since you got here about, the role of bringing back, the brotherhood, the alumni, the people that, set the tone on Green Tree for what these kids have now. Michael Irvin has obviously kind of taken on a life of its own, being the unofficial cheerleader for this program and what he does on the sideline. His resume speaks for itself, and you can still see how much this thing still means to him. How important is it to have that input from guys who did it before? Thank you.
Well, I think the best part of the way Mike brings his energy is the fact that he makes it very clear he's very grateful for the University of Miami and for his time as a Miami Hurricane. And I think that's a feeling that needs to be expressed by any and all of us that ever played here, because, man, a lot of us came in here not knowing, our head from our feet. And because of that, we had some great teachers and mentors along the way, and they impact us in a manner that, look at some of the careers that have taken off here, both on and off the field. So when guys like that come around, there were more guys at the game. Edgar and James was there. Getting a text from Santana Moss, who I was a GA when he was here. I remember his whole Superman, mantra that he brought to Miami. Devin Hester, Greg Olson, I don't know, he couldn't make it, but he's always in contact. Dan Morgan. And there's so many. It goes on and on and on. And it's not just those frontline stars. It's the guys that played here that maybe were behind the scene and were role players that you get a chance to communicate with. That is strong. That's why I came to Miami as a player. That's why a lot of my teammates, our teammates, came here to Miami. And that's why a lot of guys have come back. And we need to keep doing that. And we need to just keep making it almost like a sign, a token of gratitude. And now it is our role to do that and mentor the guys that have followed us, which is this current team right now, and help them get into the future.
Next, we'll go to Barry Jackson. Barry, go ahead.
Hi, Coach. It's difficult, if not impossible, for NFL teams to nail all their signings in free agency every March and April. And yet you all seemingly have nailed it at each position in this past portal cycle, getting one or multiple players at every position who've been really good. Could you tell us how that process has worked? I know you don't have someone with a GM title, but who has been most involved in evaluation of these players on tape, which leads to the successful portal cycle?
Well, I mean, recruiting and evaluation and projecting players in the words of Art Kehoe, he used to tell us all the time, it's the most imperfect science in the world. You don't know who's going to explode in an awesome way and develop at a really high level. You don't know who's going to have an unfortunate injury, who's going to fall in love with another path in life and maybe lose interest in football, or you just never know. There's so many different avenues these guys can take when they arrive. And so it's everybody's involved. I know we don't have titles, but I just think the general manager title is very different in the NFL than it would be in college since there's no set salary cap. But our recruiting department works hand in hand with our coaches and myself. The recruiting department headed up by Dennis Smith, who does an unbelievable job in making sure that we are all watching film, that we're all evaluating film, that we're all exchanging our opinions, our evaluations, our assessments, that we're doing them in person, that we're getting people here to camp, that we're going on the road, watching them competitive situations, that we're doing thorough background checks, and also knowing that when we arrived, you really had to overhaul the roster and not only get your frontline players, but you had to, stagger it in a manner where it's going to keep getting better every year. So it is a team effort. Everybody's involved. We need more out of everybody. I think there'll be, I don't think not one single person could take credit. I don't believe that I should ever take credit for that as well. But we do push it. We need more out of everybody all the time. It is talent acquisition is tied into player development and personnel usage. And when you're able to hit on all three of those at a time is when the magic happens. And we have a long ways to go, but we have certainly seen a lot of progress in those areas coming together.
And I had one last question on the same topic, if it's okay, Carter. How many eyes do you want, Mario, on each veteran portal player before you offer him a scholarship? How many eyes in your building do you want to review tape of that player?
As many as possible.
Yeah.
I could lay out a blueprint for you that looks like something out of the movie A Beautiful Mind, where there's all kinds of attachments and byways and highways. But it is extremely thorough, and we don't want groupthink. We want a think tank. We want a organic, natural, very. I want the critical factors on every single player without seeing somebody else's evaluation. I want to see the honest evaluation of a coach, so that there's no hiding in the evaluation game. It's nowadays it's easy. I miss the old days when there wasn't an internet and you had to go out and you had to have conviction on a player with what you saw, what you evaluated. Now, if he's got 20 offers, people are just going to throw an offer out there too. So I don't know. I think we certainly we have a really good process. I want to credit again, all the people involved, especially Dennis. And again, long ways to go.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Next, we'll go to Jordan McPherson. Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, hey Mario, to stick with that a little bit, just two of the guys specifically, Keontae Scott and Jacoby Thomas, really big games last game. I think Keontae was out there for every defensive snap. Just how have you seen the two of them sort of fit into their roles, especially since they came in after spring ball and had to sort of pick things up pretty quickly?
Yeah. To make defenses nowadays, when you spend a lot of time in nickel, your nickel has to be an absolute stud. And watching Keontae more in 23 than in 24, when the scheme um, predicated him being more in that role, we felt he was a top shelf player, hands down. And then watching Jacoby, who was a starter and then split time over there, we thought that one, his ability to communicate, because you see that on film all the time. You saw it. Number two, the way he would trigger. His reaction time was off the charts. And then number three, his physicality was something that was really, really impressive. And we need to be more physical and better tacklers on the perimeter with the ability to play man to man. So we thought those two guys were the perfect fit for us. And they'll be the first to tell you they're unsatisfied. They have not played to their full potential yet, but they have certainly made us better. They're progressing really well. They're doing a really good job, and their best football is ahead of them.
And then wanted to ask you about just the play of the line of scrimmage. Obviously, that's your bread and butter. That's where you'd say everything succeeds. You want everything to succeed. Just both offensive line and defensive line through 5 games. What has stood out to you on both ends?
Well, I like to think of it as our bread and butter. I think that the philosophy and the blueprint, I think we all now share the vision collectively. We've come a long way. We've come from very narrow, streamlined body types to really thick and powerful um, type trench guys that they can create movement. They can affect the line of scrimmage. They can be very disruptive on defense. guys with more twitch that are weight room junkies that understand the value of strength and conditioning. I think Coach Herb has done a phenomenal job with his staff and those guys. So I would evaluate in a manner where we've come a long way, but as you watch film, there's so many areas where we have to make massive improvements. I mean, what we want to accomplish requires us to get a ton better at a ton of different things. So we're at work today and saw some improvement today, and we'll get right back at it again tomorrow.
Next, we'll go to Adam Lichtenstein. Adam, go ahead.
Hey Mario, thanks for doing this today. Just looking back at some of the stuff from Saturday, I saw, you guys had 13 penalties, and right now you guys are, I think, tied for most penalties and per game in the conference. Just how much have you been, trying to clean that stuff up? How much is that going to be a focus over the next, over the bye week, to try to clean the pre-snap stuff up, and something like the procedural and penalties and stuff.
No doubt it's priority list at the top of it. Certainly when we hurt ourselves, it affected our drives. It affected the outcome of drives as well. We overcome them sometimes, but when you play really good teams, those things could be fatal. And so, the benefit of being able to learn your lessons without learning it through consequence is great. But it has to be driven all the way through because certainly it's not a stat line that we want to be on. And it starts with myself and every single person in this building. It's not acceptable. It's not what we preach or teach, but we've got to make sure we get the results that we want.
And next we'll go to David Lake. David, go ahead.
Yeah, Coach, feel like every week we're asking you about Bain and Mesidor, but wanted to ask you this week about just their snap counts being so high. I think their final snap counts were in like the mid 70s, high 70s. What does that number say about them as players? And have you ever coached defensive ends that have played that much in a college game that didn't go to overtime?
Sure. I mean, there was a time where no one came out of the game, right? The snap count was high for them, and the first thing I do is I just look at their coach, Jason Taylor, and ask him, "Did you ever come out of a game?" He says, "No." Played up to 80 snaps. Now, is that ideal? Absolutely not, because there's other good players on our team, and we're getting them more involved, and they're getting snaps as well. When those guys got such a high rep count and were still as productive, as effective, and affected the game as much as they did, it speaks volumes of them as competitors, as tough guys, and as guys that really invested a ton in strength, conditioning, nutrition, and prepping their bodies to be able to go deep into a game like this when so much is on the line. So a lot of credit to them. They don't mind being pushed at all, and certainly there's going to be some times where the snap count's really low, and there's going to be games like Saturday where everybody's got to have a whatever it takes mentality.
I want to ask you too, just in general, how's the overall health of the team coming out of the game?
I think okay. I mean, you got some things that that hurt a lot, and that kind of you have football. You have week 5. I wouldn't call it an injury report, but I call it a team health report where we will benefit from having the bye week where we can still get the right kind of working with a lot of guys that maybe not necessarily need a 2-hour full contact practice, but there's a lot of guys that do. So we're doing it as responsibly and as intelligently as we possibly can, always keeping the health of our team at the forefront of the decision process. But it's a very detailed plan for each and every person, but for the most part, we feel like we're pretty healthy.
We've got time for a couple more. We'll go next to Chris Stock. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, Coach, just your overall thoughts when you look back at the FSU game, maybe on film, just what stood out to you. And then if you could comment a little bit on the fourth quarter, just the large lead and obviously the way it ended, maybe some things that stood out to you or your messaging to the team with finishing better, obviously.
Yeah, I would say 3 quarters of dominant football and 1 quarter that wasn't up to the standard. Looking back and reflecting on it and analyzing it, I mean, we called it to win. We called it to be able to extend our lead and up 28-3 with the ball. We had our chance to do so. And back to the penalty questions that came up earlier, penalties derailed our 2 of our last 3 drives. And certainly something that our players immediately recognized after the game, because of course you're always fired up about a win up there, but there was a certain sense of, you know what, we're better than that. We could finish, and we could have put an exclamation point on it. Still got the win, still dominated for almost the entire game, but that's not the way we finish. And you cannot allow yourself as a team, you cannot allow ourselves, we cannot allow ourselves as a program, me as a coach, to not play the full 60 minutes and overtime if necessary. Can't ever do that. You saw again this week, there were multiple overtime games, a ton of very tight games in conference all over the country. There is no wiggle room for allowing and giving away plays. So a good lesson learned, some good deep diving into the film and the what's, the hows, and the whys to get better. And we go from there.
And we'll wrap up with one more question from Adam. Adam, go ahead.
Hey again, so kind of speaking of like those late game situations, those fourth quarter situations, how much do you balance, I guess, I guess feel for the game, input from assistant coaches, things like that, versus analytics, like, 4th and 5 at the opponent 30, we do this, yada yada yada, things like that. How do you kind of take in all that information and kind of decide where to go from there?
Yeah, you lean on both. Analytically, you always look at what does it say, and then you think right away, present moment in time, what is the tone of the game? Is it a defensive struggle? Is it a shootout? Is one side of the ball gassed? Is one side of the ball injured? Are you not going to be able to do this because a certain player is missing or is not having a good day? You take those things into account, and then you make a decision really before it actually happens. You should have something in mind before you get there. And we had a similar situation the other day and went with what we thought was the right call.